When I go to Black Hat in Las Vegas every year, I've been going for 16 years. And obviously, it's trended more from like the most legit hacking conference on the planet to a little bit more vendor happy RSA vibe. And I hear a lot of complaints about that. But it's one of my favorite things to do at Black Hat is to go to the vendor floor and especially go to the startup corner. It's a good way for me to kind of see where the industry thinks that the industry is going. So you're looking at people that have either raised enough money to buy these expensive booths at this giant conference, and you're trying to see what are they trying to build? What are like where do they think that the industry is going over the next couple of years? Otherwise, them and their VCs wouldn't have put this big bet on whatever it is that they're building. I also just love startups. I'm an angel investor. I really enjoy that whole ecosystem. I really am passionate about helping and connecting with founders. I think it takes a ton of guts and bravery to do what they're doing. But I'll tell you what happened this year. I got there and virtually an entire row in Startup Alley or whatever that corner it is that they set up, almost an entire row was AI SOC companies or AI red teamers. A lot of them were positioning themselves as virtually the same thing. By the third or fourth booth, I was like, hey, so how are you different than everyone else in this row? It's a crowded space. Obviously, people see the writing on the wall with where AI can help in cybersecurity. I think a lot of people early on in the AI hype cycle, maybe 2 years ago, were throwing everything at the wall. AI powered everything, throw it at the wall and see what sticks. I think we're somewhere on the other side of the top of the bell curve of the hype cycle around that, especially in cybersecurity, where we've all gotten to the point now where we realize that it's not the magic pill. It's not going to solve or replace anything or everything right now, just based on the capabilities of the AI tools that we have at our disposal. And while, yes, there is rapid improvement in that space, I think now we have like a better idea and direction of what these AI tools are going to be good at and what they're not so good at least for the foreseeable future. I could be super wrong on that. Sam Altman might have a magic wand that he hasn't waved yet. And this could all change by the time I release this video. But I don't think so. I think we've gotten a pretty good grasp on what it's good at. That all being said, what I'm here to talk about today is a report that I got my hands on that is as close to a scientific study as you can get around AI agents in the SOC. And like I said, there was a lot of these startups that were chasing that space. So that signals to me that we have, as an industry, have decided that that might be one of the areas that AI agents might be most helpful. But I do want to cut through the hype and the noise and the VC flood of marketing dollars. And I think this report does a really good job of, like I said, as close as you can to a scientific study of looking at what actual experienced SOC analysts think of and like actually operate with, what they think of these tools and how their experience changes from a manual investigation to one with one of these tools in their hands. So really quick, the report is put out by the Cloud Security Alliance and Dropzone AI, who is a supporter of the channel. So just want to be super clear about that. But I love reports like these. So supporter of the channel or not, if you've read my newsletter, if you haven't, go check it out in the description. If you read my newsletter, I love covering reports like these when the companies put the effort into slicing and dicing the data that they either already have or running a research project like this. I think this is super valuable for the community to run through. So to start us off and to understand the data as we go through it, what do I mean by like as close to a scientific study as we can get? When it comes to these kinds of reports, generally they're relying on like survey responses, but this, they actually put some experienced SOC engineers through a test, through an experiment of doing a couple of investigations that would realistically happen in a SOC. Some of those participants were using this AI SOC that was put out by Dropzone, and some were doing it manually. But the number here is what surprised me, 148 participants. This is fantastic. If you can get over 100 people to respond to a survey, I think that's like a good research paper. Generally, they target in the low few hundreds if they can get like 100 to 300 people to respond to just clicking answer questions. The fact they got 148 SOC engineers with similar levels of experience to run through investigations. This isn't like clicking some multiple choice thing about like how much money they spent on blah, blah, blah. You've all seen those reports. But this is like, simulated SOC situation scenarios, things like AWS S3 buckets alerts, or Microsoft Entra ID failed login alerts. This took some time. And so, hey, I just kudos on getting 148 people. And that's why I say this is like almost scientific level experiment with that level of participants, control, and variable type study. So the key takeaways were pretty obvious to me. I've had my hands on Dropzone before, but maybe less obvious to you if you haven't experienced kind of these AI assisted SOC tools. But the two most important things right off the bat is these experienced SOC analysts were more accurate and faster with the AI assistance than compared to the manual condition. We're going to get into like how they tested that and what they're measuring here, but this is great data in my opinion. The other cool thing is a lot of these SOC analysts on the way out the door were asked if they had a more positive view of these AI agents in their investigation, in their investigative capability, and pretty much all of them said they had a more positive view of AI. We're going to get to a few more surprising things like that about people's feelings about AI before and after this later in the report, because I know a bunch of you listening, a bunch of you that are about to comment aren't into it, aren't into all the AI tools, are super anti-AI. I've actually talked to Dropzone was a sponsor at B-Sides SF, and I was just chatting with them at their booth, and they said that it's actually been a hurdle for them. Being kind of an AI based company is like a hard thing for them to communicate to people that they are actually building a useful tool, because there's so much bad AI marketing stuff out there that they're fighting up against. I know a lot of people have their views going into this. This was super interesting to see that pretty much all of them on their way out had hey, we feel better about this coming out of this. So between the two scenarios, the SOC analysts were either 45% or 61% faster with AI assistance, either AWS or the Microsoft example. And one of the other key results here that they highlight is AI assisted analysts produce better investigations in less time and were more resistant to fatigue. I was when I first read that, I was like, how the heck did they study resistant to fatigue? So we'll get to that when we get to that specific question. And just in general, people had a pretty positive feedback about their experience with Dropzone to do the investigation. They called it efficient. A bunch of them called it helpful and time-saving and insightful. And even a third of them called it trustworthy, which I know a lot of people have an issue with trusting these AI agents, myself included. We've all been burned. If we've used these tools, we've been burned by them. So more experiments set up. They said a total of 148 participants representing a range of SOC and incident response experience levels were randomly assigned to either the AI-assisted condition or manual control condition. Each participant completed 2 escalated security alert investigation scenarios: AWS S3 bucket alerts and an escalated Microsoft Entra ID failed login alert. They were presented in the same order for all respondents. The participants in the AI-assisted condition were given access to the Dropzone AI platform. The manual condition group had access to AWS GuardDuty and Microsoft Sentinel. So, calling it manuals might be a bit misleading. They did have the tools that are built into these cloud platforms to do security investigations. But if you guys have seen me do videos on this kind of stuff before, some of the information that you would really want in an investigation, even like who is the email address that's tied to this alert that, their computer is doing something nefarious, that like who is it? Whose computer is it that's logged in is like 5 clicks deep in Microsoft Sentinel. So it takes a long time and it takes skill to know where that information is. That was one of the more impressive things that I saw about Dropzone when I got my hands on it the first time. Is like, hey, it just surfaced, the who it is in the title of the alert. So you don't have to go digging for it. So this report starts off swinging with a pretty big difference in accuracy. Some of the other things as we go on, the difference is less clear, but in here, it's pretty drastic in terms of accuracy of the investigation. So this is whether participants correctly identified whether the investigation required further action based on the scenario. So this is a realistic SOC situation of, hey, do I need to even look at this further at all? Or is this a benign alert? This is what people spend most of their time doing in the SOC, is just like, hey, no, this is false positive, false positive, false positive. And that's what we all, are dealing with alert fatigue. I did a whole webinar with a Harvard neuroscientist about alert fatigue. It's a real thing. Your brain just kind of turns off certain areas when you just see the same thing over and over again. And it's just like, yeah, okay, no, this is not worth looking into. Throughout the report, they did say they threw the scenarios at them in order, the AWS one first, the Microsoft one second. This is where they start to make some claims about fatigue, right? Because this was later in the day, later in the experiment. I also have some feelings about maybe, AWS versus Microsoft's platform built-in capabilities for people to find things. We can get to that as we get to later questions. But they say, hey, both groups saw a decline in accuracy from scenario 1 to scenario 2. 11 percentage points for AI-assisted persistence and 5 percentage points for manual participants. But the AI-assisted group maintained a significantly higher overall level of accuracy in both scenarios. Data suggests that AI-generated investigative summary and findings help analysts more consistently identify correct investigative outcomes, even as investigations progress and cognitive demand increases. I think this is great data, especially this 97% number. This is awesome. At this point in time, you can't even make a claim about cognitive demand increasing or fatigue. This is probably early in the experiment, and the manual people only had 68% accuracy of determining whether the alert that was kind of seated in this pile needed more investigation. So right off the bat, 97% accurate, like catch the issue, needs more investigation with the AI assisted tool. I think this just goes to show it's good to have a second set of eyes. Whatever your feelings about AI agents, they are a second set of eyes on something, whether you're writing something and you need an editor, or if you have an AI agent that has a ton of context. Context is super key here, right? This isn't just like you loaded ChatGPT and asked it a question about an alert because it has no context. These AI SOC tools like Dropzone are filled with the right context to make these kinds of decisions, which is super, super key. Go read Daniel Miessler's writings about, the future of AI and where it's going. And he makes the key point that it's not about the newest, latest, and greatest model. GPT-6 isn't going to save us all. It's context and scaffolding. And that's what Dropzone is building around your SOC data, is context and scaffolding to get the right models with the right context. And that shows right here in this 97% and 85% accuracy. So accuracy was 1, speed is number 2. This is something we obviously all care about. Everyone watching this has a great respect for their time. And thank you for making it this deep in the video. For someone who respects the time as much as you, I know you do. Well, then right here, this is going to mean a lot to you. Mean time in minutes, time of investigation. So we have 58 minutes with the AI-assisted AWS situation versus 105 minutes, and 30 minutes in the Microsoft situation versus 78 minutes. Consistent pattern. AI-assisted analysts completed both scenarios more quickly than their manual counterparts. AI-assisted users averaged just under 58 minutes compared to an hour and 45 for the manual group. 30 minutes versus an hour and 18 minutes. So that's 45% and 61% faster that we talked about in the key findings section. Here's the actual experiment versus, in AWS versus Microsoft. Keeping in mind, again, as they presented these situations in order. So even when you get to that whole cognitive load and fatigue situation that maybe they're simulating later in the experiment, you still had just a 30-minute time of investigation for this Microsoft thing. Obviously, it seems like this was an easier investigation because both people, completed it much faster, but good to keep in mind. Completeness. So this is where I start to like the thoroughness of this report a whole lot. I think the speed and accuracy are the two just most standout findings, and the two with the clearest difference between those using an AI agent and those not. But I do like the rest of these findings as well. So like completeness, I didn't know what to think when I hit this page. What is completeness of the investigation? So it turns out the participants were responding with, like a summary of the incident, the findings, like all the key pieces of information, things that you would expect an incident responder to do. And then they were saying each participant's response was scored against 7 core investigative criteria, which represented key analytical steps expected in each scenario. So it's probably like, oh, did they include, the IP of the threat actor? Did they include this? Did they include that? So they had 7 things here that they were rating in completeness. So, they got 1 point for clearly addressed, half a point for implied or partially addressed, and then 0 if it was not addressed. So the total possible score per response was 7, and the scoring was done by applying keyword pattern-based matching process to identify whether each investigative step was present. So off the bat, I noticed, like the mean score is, about half what you would expect in these situations. So no one was going for 7s here. They do call, these looked pretty similar to me, but they do call out, a statistically significant difference in the manual group, especially in the second scenario. But even though these two, they also talk about the drop between scenario 1 and scenario 2, especially for the manual people, dropping 29% decrease in completeness. So again, this is the whole cognitive load thing that they're saying. The Microsoft one came later in the experiment. So this mirrors a common SOC reality. As investigations accumulate, analysts often experience alert fatigue or reduced cognitive bandwidth, leading to skip steps, higher risk of missing critical detail. The AI-assisted group showed a smaller decline, just 16%, indicating that AI augmentation can help maintain thoroughness over time. I thought that was an interesting point. Length of report responses. I thought this was like a iffy thing to measure because they're going just by word count on like the average steps length versus average conclusion length. I think AI tools could be maybe a little bit more verbose than people. If you're writing on social media, if you're writing in blog posts. So I kind of squinted at this one at first, but then I thought about it, and we're not talking about social media posts or blogs. We're talking about incident response reports, which you want to be as in-depth as possible. So while maybe some of this is, accounted for by just wordiness of AI assistants versus manual people, I think that this is a strength of AI assistant things in general. I think, Dropzone or not, SOC analysts out there should be using AI tools to help write their reports or summaries because it'll help them not forget things. It'll help them make sure that they're communicating this stuff clearly. I think all of us have varying skills of communication, and this could help level the playing field. Especially a lot of times, a lot of SOCs are outsourced these days, right? So they're not necessarily someone working at a company. Using the AI agent to help write the report could really help make sure that all the right context is included. Again, they bring up the cognitive decline bit as they get later. The manual group's sharper drop in detail coincided with the steeper decline in completeness, meaning they were not only writing less, but also omitting more of the required investigative steps. AI users, however, retain more detail and more of the expected steps, reinforcing the relationship between written depth and investigative coverage. This is what I mean. I was initially squinting at this going, word count, really? And then it's like, man, we are talking about investigation coverage and completeness and all this kind of stuff. So I think this is a solid metric to measure on. Now we get into like the people's feelings about the experiment. So we're like asking the SOC analysts about their perceptions of things. So they rated their percepted difficulty of the investigation. I think it was out of 4. So 4 was highly challenging. 1 was not challenging at all. They all kind of went mid-ground between 2 and 3, and they all kind of rated the same, whether it was manual or AI assistant. They said this consistency means that the differences observed in completeness, response length, and investigative time are unlikely to be explained by perceived difficulty. In other words, the improved stability and efficiency shown by the AI assisted users reflect genuine differences in how the investigations were approached and executed. I think this is a really, really interesting stat to stand out, that is dead even on where people thought this was in terms of difficulty. So everyone thought that they were somewhat difficult, and they were super confident in themselves and their findings. Out of 4, a lot of people were super confident. If you got 3.6, 3.7, that means a lot of people voted for that. They were highly confident in their results. Maybe a bit overconfident, right? If we go back to accuracy, some of those were in the 60% range. So, 40% of people, or 30 to 40% of people, were skipping the alerts that needed more investigation in the manual column, and they still were very confident in their execution. So here's where I thought it was going to get really funny and spicy, was their attitude towards AI and security, especially going into this situation. These numbers are way higher than I thought they were going to be. Maybe this is skewed towards people who would agree to be in part of an experiment, but I know a lot of you out there are like super against this stuff. But I think this is, a fair assessment. I think when you cut through a lot of the marketing and stuff out there, I think people are starting to realize where AI can help. This is, part of my long intro and my feelings about the industry. It seems like people are generally reflective of this. But then, okay, now that was going into the study. Now coming out of the study, where did people feel about it? This was one of the more interesting ones. Likelihood to recommend. I mean, SOC analysts can be kind of spicy on recommending tools. A lot of them have very strong feelings about tools that they use. So 0, not likely at all. 10, extremely likely. Score was 8.7. I still expected that there would be some like grumpy SOC types in there that were all 0s and 1s on their feelings about AI, but they said that all of the answers fell between 7 and 10 to get to that 8.7. With 148 people, I thought everyone answering between 7 and 10 was highly surprising and honestly kind of a super cool indicator of where these tools are going and how people feel like they might be helping them be better at their job. This is more ammo for me that we're going towards a future of not replacing SOC analysts or replacing anybody with AI, but it's humans to the power of AI. These are SOC analysts saying, hey, I was better at my job because of this tool that you just put in my hands. I think that's going to be the overarching experience that we're going to have over the next few years. The perceived change in investigative speed. So this was just the AI assisted users, so not the manual people. Did the platform change the speed of your investigation? Half of the people said that definitely significantly sped me up. 41% said it somewhat sped me up. So only 6% of people thought that there was no impact on speed whatsoever. So just in perception, 94% of people thought that it definitely sped them up. Over half of them said significantly so, which the data compared to the manual group seems to back up here. And then, yeah, just a general positive sentiment of using the platform. So super cool. Kudos to Dropzone about that. And then here, okay, again, some people I thought would be grumpy about AI going in. 94% of people said, yes, I view AI more positively on the way out. Only 6% said, nope, my opinion didn't change. Maybe they already had a positive, or maybe some of the grumpy people are in that 6. So super cool to actually get the hands-on experience and then come out of there going, all right, I see the light. I see that this might be super helpful for me now. There was some open-ended feedback at the end. Dropzone gave me exactly the information I needed. That was my perception. They gave me hands-on stuff too, and that's exactly what I was saying was, hey, all of the information I would need to answer was right up front, so completely echo that. Fun experience, nice change of pace from my usual investigations. This is a thankless job a lot of times, right? So investigations are hard. It's a lot of triage, a lot of noise, not a lot of signal. So super cool that they had a positive experience with that. And a platform functioned well. Nothing got in the way of completing my tasks. That's also super good. Sometimes people feel like they're fighting the tools that are meant to help them. And it seems cool that that's not the case here. All right. Thanks, Dropzone, for supporting the channel again. This was super cool to get not just my own view of the platform when I got hands on it. You can go check out that video. I go through and click through blind. I kind of did an unboxing of Dropzone a few months back over the summer. Super cool to get this many actual experienced SOC analysts' opinion about the tool as well. So thanks for supporting the channel. This report, super valuable information. So I hope this was a glimpse like beyond the hype, beyond the marketing of these AI agents in the SOC and what actual analysts' experience are with these things. So please go check them out in the link in the bio. Please tell them I sent you. It's the best way to support this channel and what I do is to check out my sponsors. I'm in a cool position where I am turning down lots of sponsors. So the ones that I am bringing you, I feel like I would use or I have used, and I think they're worth your time. So go check them out. Tell them you heard them from me. Super, super good way to support me. And I truly think, and apparently 148 people truly think, that it's probably worth your time to do so. All right. If you found this helpful, if you do check them out, please come back. Let me know. Did your experience echo what we went through today? Seems pretty positive. So come back in the comments, let me know, or share this video with anyone you know that works in the SOC that might not stumble across it on the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and do all that cool stuff down below and follow for more cybersecurity news.